समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या? समझ में नहीं आया।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme related documents carefully.
Prime Minister Modi is in Israel for the second time since he took over in 2014. His last visit was in 2017. This, however, promises to be a much more substantive visit than even the last one, because what's happened since then, Israel has been through multiple wars, which is not that unusual for Israel, but what's happened over the last couple of years has been unusual even for Israel, because for the first time since 1973, when Israel got into a full-fledged war, they've seen something that looks like an equivalent of that, although broken in stages. So there were 7th October 2023 attacks by Hamas, then this continuing bombing over Gaza, of which India has been critical. ThePrint has also been critical editorially. And a lot of Israel's allies have also raised questions about. But then also the war on Hezbollah, the destruction of Hezbollah, and along with near destruction of Hamas, destruction of Hezbollah, and then the subduing of the Houthis. These were the axes of resistance, as the Iranians called them. And then the 12-day war with the Iranians. So Israel has been in the thick of it, almost taking you back to the 70s. Not quite similarly, not to the same extent, but to some extent, combat or military combat has come to Indian subcontinent as well, and India has also been tested. India has been involved in an 87-hour skirmish with Pakistan, responding to a terror attack, as we know, in Pahalgam. And that is where both countries have also seen a new sense of urgency in engaging in a very different sense, at a very different level. As I sit down to record this episode of Cut the Clutter, Prime Minister Modi has not yet started speaking at the Knesset, which is what Israel's parliament is called. When we hear his speech later in the day, maybe we will have takeaways for yet another episode of Cut the Clutter following this on India-Israel relations, because this is now a very substantive relationship. If you look at the map of Asia, look at the other edge of Asia. Israel sits on the other edge of Asia. In fact, he sits between Asia and Africa. It just has a little bit of the sea between itself and Africa. After all, what is Egypt? Egypt is mostly Africa. Only a part of it is in Asia. On the other hand, you have India, which is at this end of West and Southern Asia, because after this you have the Bay of Bengal, and then you come to Eastern Asia. So in this very large region of the world, and geopolitically very, very important, remember the fourth largest economy in the world resides in this region. Remember, 3 nuclear weapon powers live in this region, that is India, Israel and Pakistan. Israel not formally, but India and Pakistan formally. Remember also that a large percentage of the world's energy resources reside in this region. It's not just the Arab world, it's also Iran, Azerbaijan, Central Asia. Critical minerals are spread all over there, and precious metals also. This is a very significant part of the world. Also, this is also the place of residence of both Sunni and Shia Islamic power. Sunni power, you might say, arises from the holy places in Saudi Arabia, the Shia power from the holy places in Iran, but also Najaf and Karbala in Iraq. On the two edges of this region sit Israel and India. What's common between the two countries? I know it's very tempting to say that both countries have fear of militant Islam or radical Islam, etc. But that is a very small story. That's a side story. The two countries also share something else. The two countries are genuine democracies. Now you can say this is flawed, that is flawed. Every democracy is flawed. If you call something a perfect democracy, if you ask me with a gun to my head to show you a perfect democracy, I will show you North Korea, because after all, they call themselves Democratic People's Republic of Korea. So there is no such thing as a perfect democracy. They are all flawed. Within that, the real democracies where governments change because of somebody's vote are Israel and India. In fact, this is something that I have written in the past, and this has led to some debate and discussion. But the fact is that depending on where you start, you can start on one edge of the Mediterranean Sea or from the Red Sea and come right up to the Bay of Bengal. There are only two countries where when a Muslim goes to vote, the Muslim in these countries may not get power, right, and may feel marginalized as they do both in Israel and in India, and with good reason. But the fact is that these are the only two countries where a Muslim votes freely in a manner that it might make a difference to who comes to power or who loses power. Israel itself has about 20% Arab population. This is not West Bank or Gaza. This is the Israeli Arab population. And because Israel has a proportionate system, they form a coalition of their own parties. It's called the Arab List. They often get about 10% of the vote, which means they get 10, 12 seats, about 10 seats in the 120-member Knesset. It's always a coalition government, and that's how the Arab List also gets an opportunity quite often to participate in the government. These are two very complex countries, but these are also very complex democracies. India, after the initial hesitation, because Mahatma Gandhi had some questions and hesitations, but after just a very short while of initial hesitation, was among the first countries in the world to recognize the state of Israel. However, India has always had a commitment to the two-state solution, and this has cut across party lines, cut across ideologies in India. Even the Modi government is committed to a two-state solution. That said, our relationship has moved in fits and starts. So they've been periods which I can divide in terms of degree of hesitation. So first of all, say until India faced real foreign threats, real foreign military threats. Until the early 60s, India was quite distant from Israel. Then India changed. 1962 came the Chinese, gave us trouble. India needed some critical weapon systems in 65 with Pakistan. In both occasions, India reached out to Israel. In fact, 65, there is a story that Israelis were willing to send some stuff that India needed, but India requested Israel if this could come in ships not carrying Israeli flags, but maybe carrying some neutral flags or flags of convenience. But the answer they were given was no flags, no weapons. That was the second stage of hesitation. Then we came to the third stage of hesitation. Remember 1973, the Yom Kippur War took place. Arab countries came together against Israel. The oil shock came in, and Mrs. Gandhi also, Indira Gandhi also, took her politics in a very hard left direction. This now became more than hesitation. It was in this decade, in the 70s, that India reached the final of Davis Cup, where they were drawn to play against Israel in Israel, but India decided not to play Israel and forfeited the match. That was India's best opportunity to win the Davis Cup. India had reached the challenge round in the mid 60s, in 1966, when they went to Australia to play Australia and lost 4-1. This was India's second chance. India then had a dream team for Davis Cup. Through those 2 decades, Ramanathan Krishnan, Jaideep Mukherjee, Premjit Lal, etc., India was very strong in Davis Cup, particularly because it was an amateur tournament, not yet open to professionals. But India was willing to sacrifice that. In the 80s, things began to warm up a little bit, but not a little bit. Why? Because India now faced really serious internal security issues. Remember, how did India's most fancied acronyms come into being? NSG, SPG. NSG was set up because the government thought that, look, Operation Blue Star, Golden Temple, you use the army. That caused troubles for the army. It also led to mutinies and protests within the army by Sikh soldiers, Sikh units. you will have these challenges in future. Why use the army? So have a paramilitary force, something that's called paramilitary, works like the army, a specialized anti-terrorist force. And that's how NSG came in, National Security Guards. Once again, Mrs. Gandhi got assassinated. She got assassinated by two Delhi police guards who were assigned to her. Once again, this system thought that VIPs, VVIPs in this country will always be under threat. So you needed a special American Secret Service kind of force to protect them. And that is how SPG came into being. Both NSG and SPG in their initial years were trained by Israelis or in Israel, as were some of our special forces. None of this was made public at that point. That was the fourth stage of hesitation, although by this time hesitation had eased up quite a bit. And then comes Narasimha Rao in 1991. By this time, the Cold War has ended, the Eastern Bloc is gone, the Warsaw Pact is gone, the Soviet Union is gone. India has begun to reform its economy, and he decides to upgrade India's relations with Israel to full diplomatic level. That happened in January 1992. Serendipitously, on that morning, I was in fact sleeping in an underground bedroom at a resort on the Lebanese border. I was on a visit to Israel, and I got a call on my phone in the room saying that Israeli Army Radio has a program called Boker Tov Israel. Boker Tov means good morning, and they want to feature you for just a minute. Just speak about what do you think is the implication of India upgrading its relationship with Israel to full diplomatic level, and close it by saying Boker Tov Israel, good morning Israel. I've told you this story before. It becomes relevant often enough because this is when the final hesitation was given up. After that, again, the relationship has gone up and down in fits and starts. Vajpayee government was very open to Israel. In fact, in Kargil, when Indian Air Force found it difficult to target anything of consequence with free-fall bombs or unguided bombs, it was the Israelis who provided almost overnight laser guidance kits for the bombs that Mirage 2000 dropped, and that made a big difference. The UPA was quite hesitant because UPA's own constituency, it's not as if India's Muslims have a problem. India's Muslims are as committed to India's security and India's security interests as members of any community in India. It was the left element of the Congress party. In UPA 1, they depended on the left. UPA 2, Congress party's own left, which carried its own old prejudices and fears. And that is why they did not let P. Chidambaram to visit Israel after the 26/11 attacks. In fact, remember in 26/11 attacks, a Jewish family was also targeted in a Jewish prayer home. In spite of that, Chidambaram was not allowed to go to Israel. From as much as I can remember, the two cabinet ministers to visit Israel in those 10 years, one was S.M. Krishna as External Affairs Minister, and second was Sharad Pawar as Agriculture Minister, because he really wanted to pick up agricultural technologies, particularly irrigation systems from Israel. Otherwise, there was no question of the Prime Minister going there and any other member of the CCS. In fact, when the question about Chidambaram came up, Chidambaram was Home Minister. That was the job he was given after the failures in 26/11. From that, we've come a long distance now. So what is it that we are going to talk about in Israel this time? I see a lot of speculation. India will buy this system, India will buy that system. I can give you all the names. Maybe I will give you some tomorrow, not today. But when heads of state meet, they are not like they are going to IKEA or Hamleys or Uniqlo or Fab India or something and saying, mujhko ye de de, mujhko ye de de, iska daam kitna hai. They don't sign deals. They sign ideas, concepts, and also philosophical deals, not physical deals. That is what's going to happen this time. As you will see in this article, the story that Snehesh Alex Philip has done, what we expect from this visit is a framework agreement. This framework agreement between India and Israel now will set the direction. That changes the relationship from a buyer and seller relationship to a developer and producer, and I would say improver modifier relationship. But what has Israel got? Israel's got fantastic research, fantastic technological capability, and brilliant innovation, the best in the world. What has India got? India has got a large cadre of engineers who can work on this, make it better, also produce it at scale. India's got land, India's got people and technical manpower to set up large factories, which Israel doesn't have. Israel has very little land. So India can then bring scale to the table. And what is produced here might have been designed initially or developed initially in Israel. What is produced then in India on a much larger scale can be sold not just to India. India will not be the only market for it, but this can also go to so many other markets, including Europe, to which Israel is selling now big time. In fact, if you look at Israeli armament companies, they are booked up for the next 4 or 5 years just simply from European orders. And these are the same European countries that keep attacking Israel all the time over Gaza. Anyway, hypocrisy is never a problem, is never a liability in diplomacy or geopolitics, and that is how this continues. The fact is, I refer to Indian media, that Indian media is saying, ye missile aayega, wo missile aayega, 2000 kilometer ka ek aur missile aayega. All of that Snehesh is telling you about and will keep telling you about, because many of these are systems under development. However, one thing is very clear. What Op Sindoor taught India and Pakistan was the fact that henceforth all warfare will be contactless. You will not see the enemy or adversary. Also, one who sees the enemy first will most likely win, as long as the one who sees also has the means to reach that target. A lot of the movement with hardware now will be governed by this. And that's why there will be a lot of progress between India and Israel on anti-missile defenses, anti-aircraft defenses, and anti-drone defenses, not just against large drones, but also drone swarms. And that's where a lot of specialized equipment is coming up in Israel. Everybody knows that there is no guarantee that Asim Munir will not come back at our throats at some point of time. He's already begun to get unpopular because sympathy is rising for Imran Khan, who's been incarcerated, whose eye is damaged, and whose health is suffering crippling damage. That sympathy is rising, and he is the most popular leader in Pakistan by far. That, however, should not stop me from acknowledging that he is by far the most popular leader in Pakistan. As that pressure rises on Asim Munir, we don't know how that man will react, because he'll become so insecure. He's getting insecure by the day. And when the Pakistani army gets insecure, what is their favorite panic maneuver? They create some mischief in India and then make sure this leads to a warlike situation. So once again, popular opinion swings in their favor. That is the sense of urgency with which Mr. Modi is also in Israel this time. Just a few days before Prime Minister Modi's arrival in Israel, on 22nd of February, Netanyahu delivered a very short speech in the Knesset, which was mainly to acknowledge the fact that Mr. Modi was coming and how special this relationship was for Israel. And there he mentioned a very interesting expression. He said, first of all, he said this friendship with India is not just aisi-waisi friendship. This is not like in the past. This is now very deep and substantive. Narendra Modi and I are personal friends. We talk often on the phone. That's what he said. The second thing he said was, I have a vision in which I see an entire system. And it's a system that he said is of hexagon of alliances. Hexagon, as you know, is 6 sides. In Hindi, in Hindi or Sanskrit, we'll say Shatkon, 6 sides. Now, he doesn't exactly say which country these are, but see what he's mentioning. He's saying India, so that's one nation. Arab nations, right? Obviously, when you dissect it further, he would have chosen some Arab nations. And while he doesn't say it, I'm sure there will be a distinction between Saudi Arabia and UAE, or the Saudi camp and the UAE camp. India, Arab nations, African nations. That's very important, because Africa is where he sees his interests also, in a way, in Libya, Sudan, and Somalia, where factions are fighting and where Saudis have taken clear positions. In Somalia, as we know, Israel has already taken a position by recognizing Somaliland as a separate nation. Somaliland, as we had explained earlier, has separated and declared independence from the larger Somalia. with a capital of its own. America has not recognized Somaliland, but at the same time, they are not complaining. Trump is saying, I'm thinking about this. UAE has also taken positions, and invariably, these are contradictory positions. These are also African nations where Turkey has taken positions. He sees Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, some of the others as a kind of Sunni alliance which is ranged against Israeli interests. Add to this Pakistan as well, because Pakistan is in some ways Turkey's client and very clearly linked to Turkey and Saudi Arabia. They've just signed a mutual security pact with Saudi Arabia. So Turkey, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Pakistan, all Sunni countries, he would see these. Now I'm interpreting, I'm dissecting what he said. I'm reading between the lines or getting underneath his larger statement. These countries he will see as being in a Sunni alliance that might work or that does work contrary to Israel's interests. On the other hand, you have countries that signed the Abraham Accords, that is UAE, Morocco, Bahrain, and maybe some of the others, which he may want in his hexagon of alliances. In this very short speech, and you will see it on your screens, this is translated from Hebrew by Israeli Knesset from their website. Netanyahu does not say which countries will be members of this hexagon of allies. However, he does articulate what he wants his alliance to do. He says the intention, and I'm quoting from him, the intention here is to create an axis of nations that see eye to eye on the reality, challenges, and goals against the radical axis. Both the radical Shia axis, that's Iran, which we have struck very hard, and the emerging radical Sunni axis. All of these nations share a different perception, and our cooperation can yield good results and, of course, ensure our resilience and our future. When he says all of these nations have different perceptions, the clearest example of that is India and Israel, because India and Israel have convergence on many issues and many points. At the same time, India remains committed to a two-state solution. Also, Israel wants an alliance. As members of this hexagonal alliance, Greece and Cyprus. Greece and Cyprus, both countries have problems, deep security problems. In fact, they are almost at a Cold War or maybe Cold War plus situation, territorial disputes with Turkey at a time when Erdogan wants to raise Turkey from a level higher than a middle power. Because Turkey is more than a middle power, because unlike, say, India, Turkey does not have any border threats, any substantive large border threats. And at different points of time, going back to 2019, as recently as 9th February 2026, Erdogan spoke of the possibility of nuclear weapons in 2019. His foreign minister, Hakan Fidan, has spoken about this as recently as 9th of February 2026. Talking to CNN, he said that Turkey is considering a regional nuclear arms role, although Turkey is right now is a signatory to NPT, but nuclear weapons remain in the picture. Something similar was said by Erdogan in 2019, September 4, 2019, and this was at his party rally, his party's Justice and Development Party. He said, and I quote, "We cannot accept a situation in which major powers possess nuclear weapons while Turkey is denied such capabilities." And then he goes on to say, because Israel has nuclear capability, they have that protection and they cannot be hassled beyond a point, or they cannot be threatened beyond a point. It's in this complex picture that Netanyahu is talking about his new hexagon of alliances. When he talks about this, India obviously features in that hexagonal alliance, definitely one of its larger arms in the alliance. This alliance, if you count the 6 arms, will have the world's only Jewish country. It will also have India, which is majority Hindu, at the same time constitutionally a secular country. It will definitely have a couple, if not more, of Sunni Muslim countries, maybe even Somaliland as it comes up, Greece and Cyprus, Orthodox Christian countries. Any which way you look at it, this dream or this imagination that Netanyahu has put forward will definitely have his own country, so the world's only Jewish country. Second, the country with the largest Hindu population in the world, at the same time a constitutionally secular country, at least a couple of Sunni countries, if not three, maybe UAE, maybe Morocco, Bahrain, maybe Somaliland. At least that's his idea, that's the dream. And two Christian countries are also counted in, two Orthodox Christian countries, both threatened by Turkey, that is Greece and Cyprus. Now, if such a thing comes into being, will it come into being? I don't know. But it's in this deep and complex geopolitical churn that Narendra Modi has walked into Jerusalem this time.